Thank you so much for joining us today to hear how one survivor tackled getting her affairs in order after she received her cholangiocarcinoma diagnosis. And we're also going to be sharing some practical tips for you to follow. If you didn't know, August is National Make a Will Month, and it's just a really good time to outline or to update any of your planning. My name is Carli Good, and I'm the Director of Individual Giving here at the Foundation. I lead all things individual and planned giving, and today I am joined by Lynn Lazzaro. Lynn is a retired tax CPA living in Sparks, Maryland, married to a super supportive husband who has been her caregiver for many years. She's the mother of a great son and a stepmom to two great stepsons, and she was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma in January of 2016. And this is her story of getting her affair in order begins with us. So Lynn, why don't you take it away and share a little bit more about your story?
Thanks, Carli. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, a little over 8 years ago now. It's funny how fast it's gone. I heard those three words that we all hear, that you have cancer. And I remember thinking, cholangio, what? I'd never heard of cholangio. I was told at the time I had about a year to live, maybe two, with treatment. And yet here we are, 8 years later. I was told to get my affairs in order. And I remember at the time, I felt like there were bees buzzing in my head. Honestly, Carli, I certainly wasn't hearing well, and I wasn't processing information at all. And so as the bees eventually settled down, I decided I was going to embark on a dual path. And I feel like I'm still on that path. And that was to live the best life possible I could with my diagnosis, or I was going to get my house in order and die the best death possible with my diagnosis. And today, all these years later, I just try to share my story to the extent it helps people do the same. So.
Yeah, no, that is perfect. And so maybe tell us a little bit more about get your affairs in order and what's that mean? That sounds really hard and like a hard thing to hear after you first get a cancer diagnosis.
Right.
So why do it? Why get your affairs in order?
So I feel like at any stage in somebody's life, young, old, healthy, diagnosis, it's a gift to your family. It really is a gift to your family to get your plans in order. And it's much more than a will. It's getting things in order from your medical care, your funeral plans, how you want things to be handled. And a lot of my clients over the years would say, I really don't have time for this, right? Or I don't have enough assets. I'm not rich. I don't need to do this. Or it's so upsetting to my family. I just don't want to go down this path. And what I found over many years of helping clients with this, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a CPA, but I've been involved in my clients' lives for many, many years. Some clients I've had 35, 40 years. And although the opening conversation can be uncomfortable, I think once you start talking to your loved ones about this, it really gives them some peace of mind to understand what your wishes are. And I think prevents a lot of confusion and a lot of conflict at what could be a really difficult time in your life. So, making plans for everything from who could be guardian to young children, who could even take care of your pets. It could be that simple. Where to find your passwords. I mean, there's just so many small steps you can make to, I think, give your family a lot of peace of mind. So I think it's a gift to your family. That's why.
Well, and I think maybe there's a little bit of the flip side. So what happens if you don't have a current plan in place?
Yeah, so the joke I always tell my clients is you don't think you have a plan, Carli, but everybody does. Because whatever state you're living in, there's rules of intestacy, they're called. So the rules that govern when somebody passes without a will. So the state would step in and do it. So what does that mean? That means costs, it means delays, it could mean things being distributed in a way that you didn't intend. So yeah, everybody's got a will. They might not know what it says. How's that? Now, if you already have one, that's great. Congratulations, you've got one. But it's probably still a good time. August is Make a Will month. It could also be, Review a Will month. It's a good time to make sure that everything still makes sense. Have your relationship changed? Maybe you got married, you got divorced, maybe you moved to another state. It's as simple as moving from, I'm in Maryland now. It could be, moving to Utah. And the rules in Utah are different than the rules in Maryland. So you really need to consult with someone. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients over the past. And one of the first things we do, we get to know each other. I look at all their old documents, and their ex-wife is still their medical power of attorney. And I'm thinking, really, you want her to make decisions about you've been divorced 10 years? No. So, relationships change, circumstances change. So you do need to update it, even if you have one. So.
Well, and I know another piece that kind of ties in with this is like beneficiary designations. So
Yeah.
retirement accounts and insurance policies. How did those fit into to like your will and kind of all of those different pieces?
So a lot of people don't understand, but the beneficiary designations will override your will. So no matter what your will says, I'm leaving everything to Carly. But if my beneficiary designation is to a charity or to someone else, that's going to control. And that's true with titling as well. A lot of people think they can shortcut the process by just jointly titling everything. Now maybe husband and wife, that's true, but it really is never that simple. And there's always a reason to talk to someone. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal about a month or two ago about a man in his 20s was living with someone, and they had a life together, and he made her the beneficiary under his retirement plans. They split up, and he hadn't seen her in 40 years, and she's married with her own family, right? He never had children, never married, and his retirement plan stayed the same place 40 years, and it grew and grew and grew, and it was over $1 million, and it was going to her still. And his brothers, were trying with lawyers to figure that could never be what he intended. Well, that's probably true. That's probably not what he intended, but that's what that piece of paper still says. So you do have to periodically dust it off, look at it, make sure it still makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I guess lucky her, maybe, because that probably sounds like a headache. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got all this information. We know we need to, to have a will, we need to make a plan and hopefully, but where do we start? Like, how do we get started with all of this?
I always tell people the easiest way is to just sit down with a pad of paper and start listing what you have, how it's titled jointly with someone, or tenants by the entirety if there's something unique, or in a trust if you have a trust, how is it titled? And then what you think it's worth. So kind of on one piece of paper, try to understand what you have. And then just as important is to start thinking about the people that can help you with all of this. So if you have young children, clearly a guardian. And I will tell you that's one of the biggest obstacles to people getting plans, because it's so hard to decide who's going to take care of your kids. But I always tell them,
Right.
do it. Just have a plan. You can change your mind 5 times. It's not hard to have a codicil and change that guardian, but better to have one so that there's clarity in the family and change it. When my son was very young, I wanted a certain type of a person to raise him. And then as time went on, I realized I didn't want my sister, who lives in many states away, to be the one to make him move and change his life. And so then it was someone else. And so things change, your thoughts change, but you still have to start out, who's going to be that guardian? Who do you trust that's going to help administer things? Now, it doesn't mean you saddle somebody with a job. They'll work with an attorney if you have to probate an estate. They'll work through those details with a professional, but you still need somebody to understand what you wanted. So your medical power, guardians for your kids, all those kinds of things. So first is, what do I have? The second is, who's going to help me with all of this? And finally, really, do you have any charitable intents? It's a really good time, and it's such an easy way to make charitable gifts by either designating your IRA or by putting some paragraph in your will to designate charities.
Yeah, and that is, these sort of charitable wishes and planned giving, as we call it, are so important to nonprofits like CCF because they really help us kind of plan for our future as well, and knowing that some of these estate gifts might be coming in, and it really helps us get organized and plan too.
So my turn to ask you a question. So
Okay.
I know Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation has some tools to help people. You want to talk about that a little bit now?
Yeah, I would love to. So, what we have done at the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation to make it as easy as possible for people is we've partnered with an organization called Free Will. And so, Free Will is a way that you can easily write a will. They say 20, 30 minutes. It's free to use, and you can write your plan from the comfort of your own home. So, you go onto the website, and there's a link on our website that you can get to this tool, this free planning tool. And it will ask you a whole slew of questions. Some of the things that you were just talking about, Lynn, like guardianship of children, guardianship of pets. You didn't say that one, but that's one of the
Yep.
things that it allows
Correct.
you to kind of designate. And
Right.
then all of your assets. And when it's all said and done, you get like a final legal document that's customized to your wishes. Now I know, and not that a very simple kind of direct tool maybe isn't perfect for everyone, but I don't know if you want to talk, because you're kind of a little bit more of an expert than me, just about like maybe what next steps after you kind of go through a free planning tool like the
Right,
free will
right.
is.
And I think, free will also coach people in this way that if you have special circumstances, let's say, for example, you have a child with special needs or just a complex family situation, dynamics. We could talk about some examples of that. Maybe you own a business. Maybe you've got real estate in 2 states. I live in Maryland, but a lot of people in Maryland have a beach house in Delaware. So if you've got something a little more complicated or unique, you might want to get a lawyer involved. But that doesn't mean you don't start out with a tool like free will. And then you've got a head start, you take it to them, and you've already thought through a lot of things, and you've probably saved yourself a lot in the way of professional fees, because most of these attorneys are going to work by the hour. And many of the things that you could try to work through yourself, questions, considerations that this process would put you through, will save you some professional fees on the tail end.
Yeah, it's so funny. I actually just talked to someone who I think their situation was a little bit more complicated, but they used their free will tool, then took
Right.
what free will produced to them to their attorney, and then were able to kind of streamline the process and make it easier. So that's really true.
I had a client once that had a child. They had 3 children, and one had just substantial drug and alcohol problems. And so they cut that child out very specifically. And that was important to do because they didn't want to, fuel the problem. And the family had instructions on what to do and that type of thing. But years had gone by and they hadn't updated the document. In the interim, that person was sober, well on their way to, and without someone to stop and update that language for them, it really would have been just a disaster situation. So yeah, sometimes there's complex. I mean, don't we all have family dynamics that are complex? There's always some complexity in a family that has to be looked at, but really you'll save yourself some time if you kind of get the process started this way. So yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, and I can't
Another
stress
question for
enough.
you.
Oh yeah,
So
go for it.
anything else you want to say about the impact to the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation for these gifts? I think a lot about at the annual meeting, the ways to designate either gifts for physicians or gifts for research that are really important. One of the things that my family does is we use they're called your RMD, your required minimum distribution from your IRA. Every
Yeah.
year you have to take a certain amount out. We use some of that every year to support the physicians that have saved my life. And so, you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And so a couple of things. Yes. And so once again, we have a partnership that allows you, if most major, IRAs and most major, like, donor advised funds, or DAFs, as they call, or also, you can also search those on our website and then leave a gift to CCF either through your DAF or as, naming CCF as a beneficiary of your IRA account. And yeah, the RMD, those required minimum distributions, are a way that we get. When I talk to donors, I know that a lot of donors, I'm going to say, take advantage, and I really think they take advantage for CCF for those
Sure.
required minimum distributions.
Right.
And what these gifts allow us to do is just to, at CCF, we are all about making big, bold plans for the future. And we are seeing so much advancement when it comes to cholangiocarcinoma treatments and research and just all of the new things that are coming. And so by getting these designations or knowing that we're in somebody's estate, it allows us to kind of plan for the future. It might help us even weather economic conditions that might otherwise cause a dip in funding and help have us cut back. I think of COVID and just how kind of that changed a little bit of the landscape when it came to funding. So in some ways, your gift in the future allows you to leave a legacy, and it allows us to count on funding at a future date, which is just so critical and so good.
Yeah, what I find a lot of clients like to do as well is use something like their IRA distributions or just a current gift as a way to kind of get a sense of how it feels to then make a gift under their will. They get the benefit of feeling good about what they're doing now, but also kind of understanding how that might feel if they left money, under their will. So
Yeah.
baby
Well,
steps.
we'd love for you too to, if you're listening to our lovely webinar and you've decided to leave a legacy gift to CCF, let us know, because a couple of things. One, we can then understand your intention. Like if you want it so specifically be earmarked towards research in the future, or to new patient advocacy, or to a specific thing. It helps us know what your intentions are.
Right.
And it also allows us to say thank you, because truly this type of legacy giving is we want to be able to express our gratitude for you considering us and trusting us for the future.
Yeah. It's life-changing.
So I think the last thing I want to touch on is that what to do besides sharing with me here at the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation about your plans. What are some other things you should do? You've gone through the free will tool, or you've gone to an attorney, you've gotten your estate kind of all in order. Like, what is kind of like the last piece of the puzzle almost?
I guess there's really two pieces, and I think of the whole thing kind of as a loop, and we can close it with the loop, I guess. But first, where do I put all this stuff? You don't put them in a safe deposit box at a bank, right? You have to have them nearby so that you can pull them out and look at them and work with them if you need to. But you keep them in a safe place. So I often suggest maybe a fireproof lockbox, or if you have a safe in your home, and then back it up to the cloud. My own plan is in a notebook. My family knows the notebook because the notebook has instructions, plain written instructions in my words of what I anticipate to happen, and mostly who to call. You call Carly for this, you call Dad for that, you call so and so for this, and they all know where I keep my passwords. I had a client once, her husband took his own life and he paid all the bills, and he had no idea how to get into the computer, how to pay any of the bills, log on to the bank, and it was a very difficult couple of months, very difficult couple of months.
Wow.
Now she came out on the backside really confident, knowing how to do all this, but wow, it was difficult. So yeah, I personally keep a notebook. Everything's back up to the cloud. All the documents are in it. There's an outline of what I anticipate. Johns Hopkins, who was my hospital that I work with for all my care, they have my advance directives and they have my permission to discuss everything with my family. So where to keep this stuff. B is them communicating it to people. Now that's pretty personal, Carly. Some people like to keep this stuff very private. If that's true, fine. That's absolutely your choice, and you know your family. But at a minimum, you better be sure that somebody knows where you're keeping this stuff and what your passwords and things are, at least where to get at them if they need to. If you have a lawyer, they should have copies of it all. In my family, I'm a big believer in early and often. So we talk about it. Now, not all the time, but they know where the notebook is. And when something's about to change, if I were to have significant surgery, or if we were traveling or something changed, I would pull it out and show them. And the family understands it. I think as a kind of a New Year's project, it's not a bad thing. A fresh start. You look at your goals for the year and you can pull out your notebook. And if you have a 2-page summary of your plan in your words, well, you'll know if it still makes sense to you, and you can make some changes if it doesn't. Also, the other thing I'd say is sometimes if you move, make sure that you pull it out and look at it, because every state's a little bit different. So, yeah.
So Lynn, sometimes this conversation is just really hard for people to have. And so you being, having a cholangiocarcinoma diagnosis, help us just maybe as like a closing, just reconcile with how do you have this conversation, and how do you have this, the hope side and all of those different pieces? How do you come to terms with that? Because I think
Right.
it's hard, and it's just difficult for people to even wrap their brains around.
Yeah. So there's two things I'll say, I guess. I always look at my treatment as kind of a beautiful tapestry, if you will, that there were so many different components to it. And maybe if you pull just one string, the whole thing might fall apart. And so for me, being able to be proactive and thank the team of people that made up my tapestry is a really important part of all that for me. And secondly, though, I'm still on that dual path, and that is I have hope. I carry a little rock around in my pocket that says hope. You've got your t-shirt on, I have hope that I'm going to fight hard to live as long as I can and live the best life possible I can with my diagnosis. But I'm going to really try hard to keep my house in order now that I've got it in order, because I think it's a gift to my family. I really do. And I think they do too. Sometimes they think, oh, here we go again. She's going to talk about it. But honestly, I think they all have a lot of clarity. I had to have a procedure a couple of months ago. I talked to my son a little bit about a few things. And he said, you know what, Mom, I have a lot of confidence in your team. I feel good about understanding all this. He's 29, so he's not a baby, but still, he gets it. We've talked
Yeah.
about it. It's just it's part of life. So, yeah.
No. Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining me today for this really important conversation, and you being so willing and open to share your story and your really wonderful advice. So thank you so much for being
Thank you.
on this webinar. Yeah.
A lot of fun. Happy to do it anytime you want. Thanks.
Yeah. And remember, on our website, you will be able to find links to the free will tool, links to how you can designate, IRA beneficiaries or a donor advised fund or a whole host of other things. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thanks so
Great.
much.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Bye.